Brave New World is a 35th film of the Marvel saga and the first feature-length movie to star Anthony Mackie as Captain America, with his character inheriting the shield from Steve Rogers following the events of Avengers: Endgame. This long-delayed and repeatedly reworked project, marked by 3 different release dates, 5 screenwriters, 6 months of reshoots, and even a mid-production title change, has finally hit theaters. As expected, it doesn't mark a milestone in superhero cinema. While it remains part of Marvel's sprawling cinematic universe, that universe has lost its way in recent years, stumbling through a perpetual crisis of creativity and falling back on formulaic repetition. The general consensus is that the studio's production quality has significantly declined since 2019, especially in the post-pandemic era. The movie isn't an outright failure, despite the red flags raised by its numerous delays and reshoots, the first of which reportedly began in spring 2023, with as many as 4 rounds of filming rumored, ballooning the budget to an eye-watering and borderline unrecoupable $375 million. While it's not as poorly received as the recent Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania, or The Marvels, it's far from groundbreaking. Brave New World faced a rocky press tour, especially after Mackie described his character as someone with honor, dignity, and integrity, while noting that such qualities don't currently reflect the United States. A new installment of the adventures is loaded with callbacks to films widely regarded as missteps in the Macu's history, such as Chloe Zhao's bizarre 2021 Cosmic Oddity Eternals and 2008 The Incredible Hulk with Edward Norton. Rather than shuffling the deck, the movie feels like a journey to nowhere. The film showcases all the symptoms of the MCU's current sickness: an overstuffed plot, formulaic characters, sloppy visuals, and a complete lack of narrative boldness. Where previous entries in the Captain America franchise, centered on Steve Rogers, struck a balance between political thriller and heroic epic, this movie gets lost in its attempts to please everyone and ends up satisfying no one. The core issue with Brave New World lies in its script, which feels like a rough draft cobbled together from fragments of ideas by 5 different screenwriters. The movie tries to juggle geopolitical drama, Sam Wilson's personal journey, and sprawling sci-fi elements, but instead of synergy, it delivers a chaotic mess. The plot revolves around the investigation of an international incident, yet every 20 minutes the audience is thrown into a confusing muddle. Even attempts to echo the iconic Winter Soldier fall flat. Instead of a tense spy thriller, viewers are left with a collection of cliches about conspiracies, lacking both specificity and dramatic stakes. The film suffers from choppy editing and the Macu's trademark predictable storytelling, complete with telegraphed twists. Ultimately, it becomes another casualty of Kevin Feige's one-size-fits-all approach to Marvel screenwriting, a golden hammer that, for years now, has failed to produce golden eggs. The protagonist, Sam Wilson, portrayed by Anthony Mackie, feels slightly more confident than he did in The Falcon and The Winter Soldier. However, his heroic stances, furrowed brow, and idealistic one-liners are all still firmly present. Sam continues to relive with a persistent case of imposter syndrome, paired with inner turmoil. This culminates in yet another round of doubt and regret over not having taken this super soldier serum. As a result, there's no real hero's journey or growth into a true top-tier Avenger, a leader ready to assemble a new team to save the planet and humanity. Instead, he remains a quintessential supporting character, just the Falcon with a star-spangled shield. This multi-hundred-million-dollar blockbuster feels more like a high-budget special episode of The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Invited to the White House by President Thaddeus Ross, played by the legendary Harrison Ford, with a mix of stern authority and quiet mystique, Sam is drawn into a conspiracy after an assassination attempt on Ross during a public address. Sam eventually discovers that someone is using mind control to sabotage President's plans for an international exchange involving an extraterrestrial metal alloy recently discovered in the Indian Ocean. Directed by Julius Ona, the film starts off with bursts of intrigue and excitement. The early scenes feature exhilarating chases through Washington, D.C., punctuated by ruthless efficiency in reprisal of common baddies. However, the plot soon falters, following Wilson and his gratingly irritating sidekick, Joaquin Torres, as they bounce from one mysterious lair to the next, scavenging for clues wherever they can. The secret villain, hyped as a game-changing antagonist, turns out to be little more than a cipher. Meanwhile, Ross' eventual transformation into the Red Hulk, a supposedly jaw-dropping twist, feels anything but surprising, given that it was front and center in the film's marketing campaign and trailers. Worse yet, the reveal is marred by a not-perfect CGI. On the upside, at least we get a semblance of the destructive Hulk we used to know, rather than the cartoonish version seen in recent years. Although the way he's defeated would definitely go on the hit parade of the most ridiculous victories over an antagonist. Character development takes a backseat overall, leaving most characters flat and unremarkable, except for Thaddeus Ross. His motivations are clearly outlined, his actions grounded in the circumstances, and his portrayal as President of the United States feels both natural and convincing. At the same time, the audience is never shown why Sam truly deserves the shield. His inner struggles, doubts, or growth remain off-screen. Mackie, a talented actor, is given little room for dramatic performance. Instead, he's reduced to a functional, generic heroic figure punching his way through the plot. At least the action scenes choreographed by the team behind the John Wick franchise are somewhat engaging. This same sterile flatness permeates other aspects of the film. Supporting characters like Ruth Bader Saraf or Layla Taylor exist solely to fill screen time. Their relationships with Sam lack chemistry, and their dialogue feels like it was lifted from an entirely different movie. Even Carl Lumbly's Isaiah Bradley, whose story was a deeply emotional highlight in The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, is relegated to little more than a cameo here, delivering lines that seem like reminders the writers once watched earlier Marvel projects. Betty Ross, an integral figure in Hulk-related narratives, returns for a mere handful of inconsequential moments. The villains are a glaring weak point. Tim Blake Nelson's leader, whose potential as an intellectual adversary was teased all the way back in The Incredible Hulk, is reduced to a comically absurd cardboard antagonist with incoherent plans and laughable makeup. His monologues sound like a mashup of pseudo-philosophical lines from bad horrors, and his actions lack logic, falling far short of the menacing genius the character is supposed to embody. Meanwhile, Giancarlo Esposito's participation as Sidewinder is purely a marketing ploy. His character contributes nothing to the plot, and his scenes could be cut entirely without impacting the story. Brave New World was mired in controversy from the start of production, initially due to the inclusion of Marvel's Israeli superhero Sabra, a character with a backstory tied to training in the Israel Defense Forces in the comics. In this film, Sabra is portrayed as Ruth Bader Saraf by Shira Haas, whose take on the role, let's be honest, falls flat compared to Scarlett Johansson's Black Widow. Sure, Johansson's Widow wasn't exactly the epitome of a killing machine either, but at least she carried a believability that's sorely missing here. Watching a 5-foot-tall secret agent take down towering enemies while doubling as a national security advisor to the president stretches suspension of disbelief to its breaking point. The movie also leans too heavily into politics, and it does so clumsily and awkwardly, lacing the plot with vague allegories and thinly veiled references. The narrative once again draws on the US-Japan conflict in the Pacific, features a US president with Viktor Orban's haircut, Joe Biden's age and appearance, and the erratic temperament of his redhead successor. Gossips of heavy-handed anti-Trump undertones in the script had Disney issuing apologies as early as post-production, casting doubts on the movie's box office potential. And then there's the scene where a black man being forcefully arrested by the police, roughly pinned to the ground, mutters, "Don't tear my jacket." Sound familiar? Captain America: Brave New World is a film that, given its ambitious title, should have marked a significant milestone in Marvel's evolution. Instead, it devolves into a chaotic mix of unrealized ambitions, technical missteps, and creative stagnation. The MCU can no longer afford to rest on its laurels, churning out mere functional entertainment. Remember when these movies used to dazzle us? The film's title feels like cruel irony. Instead of bold ideas, we get recycled storylines. Political intrigue? Reduced to vague chatter about world peace. Even Sam Wilson's journey toward embracing his role as a national symbol boils down to a handful of scenes draped in sentimental music. The film is terrified of taking risks. It avoids making bold statements, opting instead for safe ambiguity. The jokes feel forced, and attempts to humanize the characters with casual banter come off like a bad sitcom. Brave New World is a movie that doesn't know what it wants to be. It's torn between trying to recapture the espionage thrill of the Winter Soldier, advancing the next chapter of Marvel's sprawling saga, and attempting to say something meaningful about the modern world. The result is a muddled mess of disconnected episodes. One of the few standout visual elements worth mentioning is the picturesque shots of blooming cherry blossoms, which are well etched in the memory. The movie avoids total failure thanks to a few dynamic action sequences and some nostalgic callbacks. But if Marvel keeps churning out half-baked projects like this, audiences may completely lose faith in the idea that superhero films can be more than mindless entertainment. Brave New World isn't a disaster, but it's a sobering reminder that even Captain America can't pull the franchise out of its creative slump. And honestly, can this even be called a Captain America movie? It feels more like a flashy 2-hour spin-off for Falcon, who remains as much of a secondary character now as he was during the finalized Infinity Saga.